That's the breakdown of this 100 billion euros is the detail that we're getting now from Bruno Le Maire, and there's going to be more information also coming from ministers who are due to speak, like the Labour Minister, in a moment as well. The three main headlines which we knew going into this that they were going to break this 100 billion euros down into would be 30 billion for environmental measures, the green transition as they're calling it, around 35 billion for business investment and support, and around 35 billion that will go into jobs and health. Now, the details that we heard there from the Prime Minister included what they're going to do in terms of employment, this focus on youth unemployment, particularly aimed at the 750,000 young people who are entering the workforce this year as they finish school or training. That's something the government had been very keen that they should feel supported. So there's 6.5 billion euros going towards that. That's going to be partly in training, but also a subsidy for companies to hire those workers. €4,000 for a company if they hire somebody who is under 26. That's going to be spaced out over a year so that the job that's created will be sustainable also and give people their first experience in the workforce after training or education. Also details of the extension of the partial unemployment scheme that had been flagged well in advance as well. We know that's going to continue until at least the 1st of November. This is where the state is paying furloughed workers. In certain sectors, that scheme will extend into next year as well. A huge focus, as you were hearing there, on the environmental side. This fund for renovation of public and private buildings, over €6 billion going to that. 4 billion will go into public buildings, so everything from hospitals to government offices to schools, and another 2 billion being made available to private homeowners for them to carry out energy efficiency works in their house, be it insulation or otherwise, public funding there also to support those sorts of works. The goal, of course, here, as we heard from the Prime Minister, as we were hearing there from the Finance Minister, is to maintain employment. The central bank here in France has warned that there could be 1 million fewer people at work by the end of this year. The government has been doing everything it can during the pandemic, and that's the aim of this plan as well, to try and keep people at work, either through furlough schemes or through supporting those businesses by creating work for them. This is a supply-side plan. All of that money is going to businesses to make sure that they have more work. Those renovation works will create work for construction companies, for example, and indirect jobs beyond that as well. So the aim here is to try and sustain employers so that employees will still be able to have work and get wages, and try to prevent a massive spike in unemployment by the end of this year.
Stephen, a lot included in that plan, 100 billion euros. Where exactly is that funding coming from?
So it's a bit something old, something new, something borrowed and something green when it comes to the money in this plan. So they're essentially 100 billion euros. The government says they're going to get 40 billion of that from the European Union's recovery plan, although the Finance Ministry has accepted that that money won't come up front. So France will have to borrow the money first and get it back later from the European Union. So there is going to be a massive increase in borrowing. But what we heard there from the Prime Minister is that they will not increase taxes to pay for that extra borrowing. The government believes that the growth that will be created by these measures will help to repay that debt by 2025. That's a very ambitious goal. It's not an exact science that this sort of investment will automatically create growth. So that's very hopeful maths being done by the French government there to try and ensure that they won't have to pay it. But the government has promised, since Emmanuel Macron was elected, that there would be no tax increases, and they're sticking to that at least for now.
Stephen, you just spoke about the European Union. We know that other countries announced their stimulus plans months ago. Why did the French government wait so long? We knew that the economy was in tatters in the really earlier stages of the confinement.
That's true, and really what the French government's answer to that is that they were focused on dealing with the emergency. So we heard at the start of that announcement by the Prime Minister, 470 billion euros has already been spent on the economic response to this crisis, sustaining people in work, loans to businesses, etc. So the government's argument has been all summer, because they have been asked constantly about this, their argument has been that they wanted to wait until this moment in the back-to-school moment of the year in September, when political life, business life and schools, etc., go back to work. And they wanted to wait for this moment to announce the plan because they wanted to deal with the health crisis first to make sure that was under control. Prime Minister, of course, saying the health situation is still evolving, so there are challenges there too. Many of these measures had been announced many months ago. We knew that the partial employment sector was going to be extended. Jean Castex was speaking last week at the meeting of the French business organisation MEDEF. He announced there the fund for small companies that they'll get for their digital transition. So many of these measures have been sort of announced in small parts, in dribs and drabs over the summer, but they wanted the effect of having a single major announcement that they could use that figure of 100 billion euros to show that it is a strong response to the crisis. Just as regards comparison to other European countries, you heard John Castex there say that it's the biggest stimulus plan of any European country. There's an arguable case about that. You know, the headline figure on Germany's plan, for example, was 130 billion. I think they're probably looking at per capita as opposed to a gross figure. But what's different about the French plan vis-à-vis other countries is this focus on the supply side, focusing on supporting businesses, creating businesses, rather than giving individuals money directly through tax cuts or other measures. The only major tax cut in this plan is a tax cut for businesses. That's taxes on production that are going to be cut. But what the idea is there is to keep people in employment, keep them earning, and sustain consumer spending, the most important driver of the economy, that way, rather than directly giving people tax cuts that the money goes into their pockets.
Stephen, lastly, we heard from the country's finance minister,